Hello, this is Jaymie White with Global Diversity News. And today I have with me Cassandra Dorrington, President of CAMSC. Now, CAMSC is the Canadian Aboriginal and Minority Supplier Council. And today we're going to discuss how CAMSC is advocating for Canadian businesses. So, first off, how is your day? How's everything going?
Well, first off, good morning. I guess we're almost into the afternoon. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to be here with you today just to talk a little bit about CAMSC.
Absolutely. So I know it's been a little bit while. We've been doing this for a little while longer than we would have liked. So because of that, let's just go ahead and let's just get straight into the questions. And
okay.
We'll go from there. And if I have any follow-up questions, I'll go ahead and I'll ask them.
Okay,
so,
excellent.
So for starters, just tell me a little bit about CAMSC. How did you guys start, and what are your current goals?
Okay, CAMSC started about 2004, about 12 years ago, and it was a takeoff on the NMSDC, basically. NMSDC had been working fairly well in the US and actually growing in their spend with the involvement of minority entrepreneurs. And they said, if we can do that in the US, why can't we do that in Canada? And so similar makeup, just we're a smaller country with similar makeup. So we had the automotive companies come together, some of the IT companies, some of the financial services, and they were probably 8 corporations at the outset who said, let's start it. And they started with a dozen suppliers, and we've grown tremendously since that time.
Okay, from a dozen to about how many now?
In our database, we probably have over 750 in our database to date.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
From a dozen to over 700. Pretty good growth. Next question, what is the percentage breakdown of Aboriginal, minority, and the women population in Canada?
Okay, when we're looking at our stakeholder base basically is focused on the Aboriginal minority, whether they're male and or female.
Okay.
Aboriginals probably make up about 4.3%. That's as of the 2011 data, and we just recently underwent a new census data, so we'll have some new data soon.
Okay.
And then when you look at the minorities, probably another about 19, almost 20%. So it's probably about 25, almost 25% of the Canadian population would be Aboriginal and or minority.
Interesting. Can you tell me I'm sorry. Continue. I apologize.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just say, a lot of the data that's coming out today, they're talking about in about 2031 and 2030, they're looking to have about a third of the Canadian population would be diverse. So that's pretty significant because when you look at the major cities, you can actually see the diversity on the street. We can now see that across the businesses. So when we have a third of the Canadian population of being diverse, we expect to get a lot more uptake, and as they're being involved in sort of mainstream businesses, and as we see it roll out from there. So we're pretty excited about the growth.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's like that all throughout North America.
Yes.
Diaspora. Quick question: what is the ethnicity breakdown of the Canadian minority? What qualifies as a Canadian minority? Because as you know, in America, it's African American, Hispanic, Native American, and the Asian population. Is it similar to that as well?
Yeah, we use terms in Canada because I'll use the term Aboriginal in Canada. Aboriginal for us means almost in the U.S. you'd call Native Americans. Mm-hmm. So that would be comprised of 3 particular groups. They would be the First Nation people, Métis people, and the Inuit people. So they make up, let's say, 4.5% of the population. Could be a little bit higher now. Then when we talk about the minorities, we're talking about the Canadian government uses as minorities in Canada. And basically, we're sort of looking at, if you had to sum it up, sort of non-white in color. So we would have included there Asian, we should have Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, African descent, and the list goes on. The Canadian government actually has a detailed definition of what is meant by a minority in Canada. And so we use that definition because a lot of our corporations would understand that from working with the Canadian government, being part of the Employment Equity Act, they'd understand that. So that is our minority population and our Aboriginal population.
Okay, interesting. With that being said, let's go back a little bit. You said that you started off with 12 organizations and moved to over 700. Can you just tell me some of the big programs that CAMSC has instituted over the past decade or so that has helped that growth?
Okay, we started out, actually the numbers were even smaller. We started out with about 8 corporations, and that has grown to 80. We started off about a dozen suppliers, and that's grown to a database of about 750 suppliers. Over that time, what we've been able to do is, with those 8 corporations, we actually had them start to reach out to their bases and start to work with us to explain the value of supplier diversity, the value of including more in your procurement opportunities. And that started to, probably in the last, I would say in the last 6 years, we saw tremendous growth. Because we were growing dramatically in the early stages. Then the recession hit Canada the same as hit the US. And we had a lot of, everybody rolled back on their spend. And then from about 2010, when Canada came out of the recession, we were working with corporations to do more procurement fairs, more mini matchmakers, more sort of events where they had to bring strategic sources. They brought their procurement people to the table to talk about what they were looking for. And then we were at that, then when you had real opportunities and real potential, brought the suppliers to the table. So the minute we had opportunities, we had suppliers, and it started to grow tremendously from there. So probably in the last, as I said, the last 6 years, we've seen tremendous growth because we were hit by the recession. We probably went up to about, I don't know, 45, 50. The recession hit us, and then we dropped down a bit, and we grew again to, as I said, we're about 80 in number and growing from there. And the similar with the suppliers, we would have started in the Ontario base. That's where a lot of the corporate headquarters are. We started in the Ontario base. That's where we had the majority of our suppliers. But in the last number of years, we've been doing many outreach events across Canada. So we'd be in Vancouver, we'd be in Calgary, we'd be in Winnipeg, we'd be in Halifax. As we moved across the country, we were able to identify other suppliers who matched what we were looking for and bring them into the network. And so, as I said, that number has grown to about 750 in our database of suppliers. So we're pretty excited about the growth of that.
Okay, that's interesting. That's pretty good, especially over the past, you said 6 years, really, is where you've seen that tremendous growth. That's interesting. Do you have any, I don't know, projections over the next 10 years? Or
well, it depends if you ask myself or the board. Everybody's excited about where we can go. What we have found is we probably net out to probably corporations who are thinking about doing supplier diversity or inclusive procurement. This is not a one-person decision. It takes a sort of, they have to look at their spend in Canada, look at their growth in Canada, and start to move from there. So when we start to work with corporations, it's usually anywhere between, let's say, 1 year to at least 2 years before we get them on board. And that's helping them build their business case for doing supplier diversity in Canada. And so therefore, we always anticipate that we'd like to get at least another 4 to 6 new corporations a year. Doesn't sound like a lot, but the fact that they have a 2-year window that they have to grow into, it takes that long to get them ready. For our suppliers, we probably get, from a supplier base, we probably get at least about 75 new suppliers a year. And so therefore, for us, we would love to be able to say that, you know, we're 80 now. Let's say we'd like to be able to, in the next 5 years, it would be sort of, for us, a big move to actually reach 100 in the next 5 years. You know, 100 solid corporations across Canada who are looking for suppliers in every region. And for our supply base, in my mind, that should easily be 1,000 or 1,200. And that again would cover large scale suppliers that's greater than 5 million in sales. That's 1 million to 5 million, and that's sort of under 1 million. Because I mean, you can get a lot of smaller suppliers, but what we want to do, we want to have positions in the marketplace for them to actually have opportunities to grow. Okay. So if you're a small supplier, you're probably looking at some of the tier ones, or you're looking at doing work with other suppliers. That builds up your capacity, so then you can move to the next level to actually do work for some of the larger tier ones. And then as you get larger, to be able to do work for some of the large scale corporations. So we're anticipating, as I said, that would be my wish. If in 5 years we see 100 strong corporate members, and that we see at least, you know, let's say 1,000 suppliers or 1,200 suppliers, I think that would be great.
Okay. I'm just curious, any like ratio goes? So for example, 100 to 1,000 suppliers, or 100 large corporations and then 1,000 suppliers, would be a 10 to 1 ratio. Do you have any goals like that?
No, we don't. We don't have those. I mean, I'd like to be able to say we have that. We don't have, and the reason I don't have that in particular is because our supply base has grown, as I said, depending on the corporates who come to the table and depending on the opportunities. We grew because of automotive, financial services, and ICT companies. So we have some deep dish suppliers in those areas. As those organizations grow or morph or change, that's where the suppliers come. Now we're actually seeing in other areas such as pharmaceuticals growing, hospitality, food services are growing. So we're seeing more, as the opportunities come there, we're seeing more suppliers fill in the gaps in those particular areas. And so Supplier, I'd say about 6 years ago, or when I first arrived, the order of the day was, oh, we want more suppliers. But what has dramatically changed in the world of supplier diversity, I'm sure you've heard this from others, they're now very focused on what type of suppliers they need, what their particular needs are that they're looking at. That's a buzzword now, whether strategic sourcing, whether, you know, we don't need 100 new suppliers, we need 10 new who do work in this area. We need 5 who are helping us design what our new innovative platform looks like. So they're looking for more niche type suppliers that are very keyed into where they're growing as an organization.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. So with that next question, tell us about Cassandra Dorrington. What makes you want to advocate for Canadian businesses as the president of CAMSC?
That's pretty straightforward. I mean, my background is I was in the corporate environment for a long time, but after I left the corporate environment, I actually became a supplier. I opened my own. I was working with Deloitte Consulting. I left them to become open up my boutique consulting business. So I was a supplier with CAMSC before I actually joined as a staff member. And as a supplier, you see the growth potential that's out there. And so if I could see it, for me, it was like, how do I help other suppliers reach their potential? So it became pretty exciting to move back in and actually start opening doors for other suppliers and actually see the growth in front of you. And I just see it's endless as to what we can actually do. So for me, it becomes more of a personal mission to be able to help move that forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Quick question. Even if it's just a little bit, but can you just explain, going a little bit further, some of the differences between Canadian Aboriginal / minority business enterprises, the climate in Canada versus the American climate?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Now, okay. Let's go back to the history of both countries, okay? The U.S., of course, I mean, I always start my story in supplier diversity. The U.S., of course, had race riots in the streets late 60s, okay? As a result, NMSDC sprung out of that, or at least Chicago sprung out of that, then NMSDC. So this whole need to make sure the haves and the have-nots come together to provide opportunity for minorities. So while the U.S. might have had race riots, Canada had some racial tension, not quite to the same extent. So while your government came on board with trying to say we need small businesses involved, we need more growth in that, they looked at other initiatives. So when you look at NMSDC's growth, it's tied to, they do a lot of work with small business administration. There's a sort of a lot of government programs for hub businesses, workers, veterans. Canadian government didn't quite do that. They only took the view of looking at small and medium-sized enterprises and working in that vein. So when we're looking at supplier diversity in Canada, our initiative is totally being propelled out of the private sector. So the growth we've seen is all the private sectors who understand the value of supplier diversity. We are now only in the latter couple of years working with the Canadian government more to try to say not just small and medium-sized enterprises, but can we have some focus on minority enterprises? Can we have some focus on Aboriginal enterprises? How do we bring those? So the government, because Aboriginal population government is quite a distinct population, they do have some strategies in particular for the Aboriginal businesses under the federal government, but we're trying to push the yardsticks on that to include minority businesses. So the difference is that the Canadian government is not as much involved as the American government is in driving businesses. Our private organizations, again, we're building the business case for Canadian companies to move in that direction. So that's why we're seeing some significant growth. When you look across, we're a very big country like the US, so our pockets of business, again, are probably closer to the major cities. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to see where we find opportunity in some of the regions to have more growth for some businesses. So you don't all have to be in Toronto, you don't all have to be in Halifax. So we're trying to move it out so we get more regional expansion to that. So the difference is really our government perspective and where our companies are located.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. Interesting to know. Moving forward from that, how is CAMSC? We talked about it a little bit previously, but how is CAMSC connecting with corporations as well as Aboriginal and minority business enterprises?
With corporations, I mean, we have strong relationships with our corporations. We go across Canada to try to identify where the corporations are doing significant work, where we can help them grow better. And so we have a lot of corporate member forums, a lot of meetings with the learning exercises, educational exercise, help grow them and how they can do better practices or move towards best practices. Once we've identified areas where corporates have needs, then we go out and we look for businesses. So as I said, we have a stable of a number of businesses in our database that works well, but we have new needs that come up all the time. So we're on an ongoing basis, we do outreach activities across the Canadian marketplace and to try to identify and bring to the forefront businesses that might not have heard of CAMSC, might not have been exposed to the market access we have. So in February, we were in Vancouver. We were working with some of the Aboriginal populations out there to bring businesses to the table, with some of the minority groups out there to bring businesses to the table. We've done it in Vancouver. We've done it in Winnipeg. We've done it in Halifax. We've done it in St. John, New Brunswick. We've been in Newfoundland. So we go across the country to try to identify and bring our corporates, bring the opportunities. And as I said, that's a key for us. If we can bring potential opportunities, we will always be able to attract businesses or suppliers to come to the table. And that's been working to grow our supply base.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah. More opportunities, the more suppliers can definitely.
No question.
Hop on board. What are the biggest challenges for Canadian Aboriginal minority business enterprises? And how does CAMSC help address these issues? We talked about a little bit before, just opportunities. But what kind of opportunities are you trying to get or help with the new organizations that you're seeing in the food service and hospitality? Like any specific examples? Or?
Yeah, let me say some of the biggest challenges for us are making sure, one, we manage expectations on both sides of the house.
Manage expectations.
Nothing happens instantaneously. So as new suppliers come forth and they get excited about, oh my God, RBC's at the table, oh my goodness, FCA or GM's at the table, and they want to, I want to do business with them. But if they're a small scale supplier, the challenge is helping them find where they fit in the supply base. And so that is always sort of trying to manage that expectation, helping them understand where they fit. The other part is helping them realize that opportunities don't happen on day one. As bids go out to the marketplace, they're usually for a 3 to 5 year window. So only when that bid is just about to open up again to the businesses or the corporations actually reach out. So the challenge is for a certified supplier to make their introduction, build a relationship, so just before the bids due out, they'll be invited to bid on that opportunity. So they have to be able to sort of be in the marketplace and survey the marketplace and manage that until the opportunity comes to the table. The other part is, of course, having corporates. The challenge on the corporate side would be able to say, as opposed to looking for a national supplier, if some of these guys are more regional, some of my certified suppliers are regional, can you break your bid down so you have regional suppliers coming to the table bidding on what's in their particular region? We've had, I'm sure in the US, we've seen the same in Canada, there's been a rationalization of the supply chain or the supply base. So corporates will tell me, as opposed to 20,000 suppliers, we want to reduce that down to 5,000 suppliers. So why would we be looking to add more suppliers to that base? So that's where we're down to, they're still looking for innovation, they're still looking for flexibility. If we can bring suppliers who are able to address that, if you're able to break your bids down, some of your bids down to regional, you're actually able to give better service, quicker service, and probably a more customized service for what you need in the region, as opposed to you have national suppliers. So on both sides, we have many challenges, and these are a lot of conversations and a lot of consultation to be able to say what works for both sides. Because it's about making sure we're introducing the right players at the right time.
Quick question on the supply chain. You said that you're seeing things, for example, obviously that's wouldn't be exactly it, but you're seeing essentially organizations going from 20,000 suppliers in their supply chain to 5,000 suppliers. Yes. Do you see that changing anytime soon? I'm assuming that a large part of that was during that 2008, 2009 a recession that pretty much hit the world. Do you see a increase in the supply chain as of 2016 or
okay, yeah, that's a very good question. Okay, it's not an increase. I mean, there's still companies, large-scale organizations are still trying to say, we don't need everybody in our database of suppliers. We want the ones that we really need to do business with. As they've customized things, so they're constantly trying to reduce that number, but it's not reduced for the sake of reducing. It's reduced to make sure we get the right suppliers at the right levels. And so that's the balance we're helping them on. So they don't need all, let's say if I get 1,500 suppliers, they don't need 1,500. But let's say someone like a GM might need those 30 ones who are doing something that they don't typically do now that they need to move into. That case, you know how cybersecurity is a huge issue right now.
Right.
They'll be looking for suppliers who will help them become more secure in their databases. So they need that particular skill coming to the table that they might not have had in the past before. You know, cybersecurity is a big one. You know, let's say when we think about all the issues around moving food around from country to country, there might be more practices or regulations on how to move food in to keep it safe and secure. Those are the type of services they're now looking for. So they're looking for people who brings whatever the newer issues are that they're facing as an organization, how you're able to deliver on that. And that might not be my current guys. That will be new guys who are hearing the new issues, bring new skills to the table, and say, let me deliver for this. How can I do this? Work with you on this. Okay. That's what I'm looking at.
Do you think
does that make sense to you?
No, that makes perfect sense. I just had a follow-up question to what you were talking about. But do you think that 2008, 2009 saw a reevaluation of people's supply chain that made them go into thinking, hey, we need to direct our resources more towards businesses that meet these certain lists of needs versus having, I guess, more suppliers who maybe have 10 who can do one need versus, okay, we need one who can do 3 different needs.
Okay. No, that's a great question. I think what you've noticed is on an ongoing basis, there's always an assessment or a correction of what's happening. So on an ongoing basis, companies continue to procure the same way they always have. And all of a sudden, you're right. When a big change happens, such as something like a recession, that your monies get tighter, you assess differently how you need to procure things. But also what happened around there, they're getting our issues. Think of the way the technology, you're on technology today, think the way technology has changed how you do your business. Yeah. Years ago, somebody like a financial institution used to have large bricks and mortars, and I have people coming to my bank, I have tellers all over the place, I have all these services. Banks have reduced their numbers of tellers, so they don't need people maintaining all those buildings or the range of buildings they had. Now they need more people who actually help them in their electronic services. Think of such things like fintech and all these mobile apps that are coming out. Everything has changed, so businesses have to look at how they're doing business differently. So what I used to have before, I no longer need doing the same thing or the same way it was doing 10 years ago. That's changed dramatically. When's the last time you bought pencils in your organization? Thank you. So I used to have a supplier who did that for me before. It's a matter of the whole industry and the whole world I live in has now changed. Yeah. And I don't need that. Or if I do, I use that as maybe I use that for my promotional tools or something in particular. The ladies in the trade shows, don't you see people with crayons now or colored pencils that you never used to see before?
Yeah, that's true.
So they're using it in different ways. Our world is changing so dramatically that you have to keep assessing what's your value and what's your relevance to your customer. And that's what our business have to continue to do. And whether the recession or whether any major impact that hits us, that's what causes us to rethink how we do business now and what I now need to do to service my global needs as well as my national needs as well as my regional needs. They might look different.
Oh, that's interesting. Two points off of that. It's crazy to think that pencils are now a promotional tool because I remember actually using them and having to use that.
Exactly. Yes, we all had that. Yes.
Yeah. So I went from that to a promotional tool. And just a random thought, I heard somewhere recently that like they're not teaching kids how to write cursive anymore, which I thought was pretty.
Well, let me just say, this whole world of education, I have 2 sisters in the educational world. That's a whole different world altogether.
We won't get into that. Actually, my dad's in the educational world too, so funny enough. But yeah, okay. So let's move it on from there. Let's not stray too far from the topic. Can you tell me a little bit more about the top cities as well as industries for Canadian Aboriginal and minority business enterprises?
Okay. Let me say in short, we service the nation, we service a country. Yep. But what typically happens is you'll have there's a lot more industry focus. As I started off by saying, a lot of corporate headquarters were located in Ontario. As a result of that, we had a lot of suppliers that grew up around the Ontario region to supply those headquarters and those plants in those areas. So as we move across, for us, let's say automotive manufacturing is probably big in the Ontario region. If I move to Quebec, there's a lot more pharmaceutical work that's going on there. So we have pharmaceutical manufacturing plants are going on there. So my suppliers there might look a little bit different. Financial services, they're all across the nation. So what they need would be for wherever they have banking institutions, whether it be in Vancouver, Calgary, Halifax, I'll be looking for suppliers across those regions. So our industries we started out with, as I said, had been the automotive, financial services, and ICT, but they've dramatically grown since then. And so therefore our supply base has grown. And so while we'll host things in major cities, because it's easier to get people to come to major cities such as a Toronto, such as a Halifax, such as a Winnipeg or Vancouver, what we do find as we surface more opportunities in other cities, we start to move some of the other cities. We're contemplating moving more into Quebec in the 2017 because we've had the pharmaceuticals are growing there, and we've had some inquiries from more suppliers in that region who want to see some more events organized around there. So we drive to where we hear more opportunities and we see the opportunity to bring the suppliers and the corporates together. So as I said, we spend a lot of time in Toronto, we spend a lot of time in Vancouver, a lot of time in Winnipeg and Calgary, as well as in St. John, Newfoundland and Halifax. But we're open to the other opportunities.
Okay. I'm just curious, do you see any large businesses moving towards a city like Montreal, just because I am aware that they're like French speaking. I don't know. I'm throwing this out there.
For us, Montreal, you're right. Quebec is it's French speaking. There's no question. Anything outside of Montreal, there's a requirement to have a lot more French vocabulary and actually be fluent in the business language if you're going to do it. So for us, as we move into Quebec, we're going to be working with an organization in Quebec who brings the fluency of the language, the understanding of that region, and we can bring our corporate partners to the table to actually start to work in that region. Because understand, the minute you move there, you need to have the bilingualism that's going on in your website and all your communication, and it has to be dynamic if you're trying to serve that population. But we do know our businesses have regional offices there, they have manufacturing plants there, so we need to be able to get our supply base across the nation who can service them. And so therefore the better way to do that is to partner them up with some of our French-speaking suppliers there and have them work in tandem.
Let's talk a little bit about the Justin Trudeau administration. What's the difference between the current administration and the prior government?
Okay, what's really exciting is that Justin Trudeau came on board with his policy was all around diversity. Diversity in whether it be in his government and whether it be in the particular initiative they're putting forth, but diversity was front and center. And so when you looked at his base of ministers, hugely diverse, and the activities they're doing outreach to try to say, how do we include more diversity in everything we do across Canada? I see that as a really positive initiative for us because we had been going to the government, and at that time it was one of the tenets of the former government. And so therefore, after a while, I mean, they were trying to do some things, but it didn't have the same connection. This new government is reaching out to us to say, okay, what do we do? How do we do things better? How do we get more inclusion? What are some of the challenges and issues? I have, let's say, someone like CRA, which is our revenue agency. They're reaching out to me to say, how do we put in more policies that are more positive for your small and medium-sized stakeholders? How do we help with that? I have the Minister of Small Business reaching out to say, we'd like to come to talk about what are some of the challenges. How do we help work with you? We definitely see a lot more outreach, a lot more positioning around. They want to make a difference. They want to include diversity in their mandate, and they want to see the outcomes of that. So we're really excited about what we're going to be seeing happening over the next few years.
Okay, good. With that being said, let's talk about the social procurement framework passed in the city of Toronto. How will that affect supplier diversity in Canada?
Well, again, the nice thing about when we talk Justin Trudeau, that's at the federal government level. So now when we talk the City of Toronto's social framework, that's at the municipal level. So for us, having worked with Toronto for 2 years to get that to the point that it's been passed, we are a strong partner with them. And so now we're talking about how do we start to introduce and get more suppliers to the table, start to lay the framework to get them included in the City of Toronto. The nice thing is we can take that and we can actually use that with other municipalities across Canada. Toronto's the biggest, and if Toronto sees it as a business case, if Toronto's able to have success, we have other municipalities, whether it's the City of Halifax, whether it's the City of Edmonton, that are tapping on the door saying, we'd like to talk to you about how do we do something like that. So we're going to be working with City of Toronto, going across Canada to try to say, let's not reinvent the framework. Let's use this. How do we customize it for your particular region? But how do we implement it and start moving forward with it? So we see great potential with that from a municipality. So therefore, we'll have the municipal level of government, we'll have the federal level of government, and the next on board is to start to do more work with the provinces.
Okay. With that being said, if this is successful in the City of Toronto, how quickly do you hope that this expands to other cities?
Well, we're having a summit, an inclusive procurement leadership summit in the fall, and part of that is inviting other municipalities to the table. And one of our panel speakers will be the City of Toronto, and we'd like to use that to actually start introducing the idea and start laying the framework for how we can help move forward with them. So we're not going to let any time go by before we start introducing that.
Okay, that's smart.
Yeah.
Attack now, and get it to expand as quickly as possible. Just like you said, that's time of the essence.
Exactly. It's hot right now. They're excited. Let's get others excited as well.
Yeah, gotta push it when it's hot.
Yes.
So so that's essentially the majority of the questions that I have about CAMSC. Definitely want to thank you for your time. But just to kind of close out, just curious, what are a few upcoming events for CAMSC?
Okay, thank you, because I wasn't going to let you leave without saying that, because upcoming we have our awards dinner, October 29th in Toronto. We have, as always, it's a great evening event that we get a lot of great networking, a lot of sort of success stories of our award winners, a lot of potential corporate members coming to the table to see what all the excitement is. That leads into the next day on September 30th, we're going to have our Inclusive Procurement Leadership Roundtable, and that's where we're actually going to sort of roll out some case studies we've been working with our particular best practice group. We've been working with some case studies. We want to introduce that, and we wanted to have some detailed roundtable sessions where these leaders in particular organizations can sit with other corporates and then help understand how things are being done, and so what challenges they've had and how they've overcome them. So we see this as a great learning forum to help others start to move the yardsticks with their supplier diversity programs. So again, that's September 29th, September 30th, and those are sort of the next two big events for us up and coming.
Okay, so September 29th through 30th. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Just one more quick question, just before you go. Just curious, where do you see CAMSC in the next 5 to 10 years? Okay,
5 to 10 years. CAMSC, we've been located in Toronto. We will have at least one or not two more regional offices on either end of the country. Okay. And our supply base, our corporate base, as I said, should be at least about 100 corporate members by that time, in 5 years. Then 10 years, I don't even want to go so far 10 years out. If I told you how much technology has changed, industry will change dramatically. So let's deal with 5.
That's actually a really good point. In 2006, Facebook was nowhere near as it is.
Exactly. So 5, I'm going to leave with 5, and we'll allow 5 to sort of inform what the next 5 will look like after that time frame.
Yeah, that's actually more than fair. I don't even think Twitter was even thought of.
Yeah, exactly.
It was LinkedIn. So that tells you technology's making things move quick. But yeah, okay. Any additional questions or comments you want to add?
I just want to say the nice thing about, let me leave you with 2 things. Supplier diversity is a growing phenomenon in Canada. We're getting more calls, more people coming to the table say, we're excited, help us understand how do we utilize this effectively, how does it become part of our business strategy. So it's working because we have some great quality suppliers who are delivering successes, and everybody wants to get in on that. So that's exciting. The other part is, in the Canadian marketplace, we're trying to be more collaborative as we move supplier diversity forward. So we're working jointly with our WeBe Canada folks, with our CGLCC folks, and we're trying to create a collective as we come together to sort of talk about the supplier diversity case in Canada, and that's been working very well for us as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So all in all, things have been very positive. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we're very pleased with the successes we've had today with many of our corporate members, with many of our suppliers, and it's all good stuff.
Yeah, it sounds great. If I was in Canada, I'd definitely join CAMSC. If they had an office in Canada, at least. But I mean, Toronto is a great city. Definitely.
Well, Toronto is a great city. I mean, our economy continues to be stable and growing, so it's all good news for work to be done.
Oh, sounds perfect. Sounds very perfect. Well, in that case, thanks a lot for your time, Cassandra. Thanks for, again, taking the time out of your day and telling us a little bit more about CAMSC and how you guys are advocating for our Canadian Aboriginal and minority suppliers. So thank you. And
thank you very much, Jim. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you at probably I'd like to invite you to the CAMSC event in September. Why don't you come and join us for dinner?
September 29th and 30th. Well, I will be in Michigan September. I think it's 13th through the 15th or the 15th. Okay. That's going to be Chrysler.
Well, I'll tell you what. If we can't get you on the docket this year, I'd love for you to come and see one of our events next year. Come and join us. Yeah, I mean, I was at the
CAMSC conference.
Okay, the procurement fair in April. Yes.
Yeah, I was at that one. That's actually what we went.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll definitely be back. But yeah, so hopefully I can make it the 29th. If not, like you said, let's connect.
Okay.
Sometime. So yeah, but
Thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. You too. You too. You have a great day. And thank you.
Bye bye now. Okay, kiddo. Thank you.